Hey, Barry. You be on mute.
Yeah, also repositioning the window here.
I'm going to make you co-host because I have to let the dogs in. I'll be back in about 1 minute. Okay.
Okay, no problem.
So yeah, can you let Glenn in?
Yep, just did.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Sam is attending to the dogs who are banging on the front door, so he'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Marley's out for a walk, so Stacy will be along shortly.
Okay. Great. Yeah, today it's Alexander Reed. Isn't that? He's got something planned.
Oh, he's going to be the presenter today. I'd forgotten that.
I think so.
Did he say what he was going to focus his attention on? I don't remember now.
Yeah, he said something about agreements, specific and general agreements. I think it was something along those lines.
Okay, well, that's been a difficult passage to negotiate.
Yeah.
We have people who insist on agreements but never agree on anything.
Yeah.
Here's Kayla.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I get the doorbell after I let somebody in instead of before.
There you go. Thank you. Have a nice one.
Thank you. You too.
Hey, Kayla, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Sorry, I just got my Starbucks coffee. Well, it's not coffee, it's tea. And I'm about to head home and then I'll be on screen soon. So how is everybody here?
Everybody's fine. Stacy just brought in Marley. Sam is out bringing his dogs in from outside.
Yeah, I did my morning hike. I think I'm going to try to do that every weekend morning, whether the kids are with me or not. Just wake up at 6 and go hiking at 6:30 and come back by 8. Sounds like a good plan for me.
Your daily constitutional.
Yeah, I get an hour of nature and then enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah. I used to do that. One time I was house sitting for a family who had a beautiful residence right next to Hartshorn Woods, and I used to take care of their dogs, so they wouldn't have to put the dog in the kennel when they went off on vacation. And so I would take Lisa, the golden retriever, up in the woods for these morning dawn, these dawn hikes before work, and it was fabulous, just fabulous. I remember one time, this was I think on a weekend, I took Lisa up in the Hartshorn Woods and walking down this fire trail at the top of the woods, and these 3 little girls come walking down the other direction. This one sees the golden retriever and says, "Is that a lion? That looks like a lion. Is that a lion?"
How cute.
The friendly lions. Friendly little lions. And Alex has arrived, and Sam is here.
Hey, y'all.
Great.
Yeah.
Hello.
Kayla, are you still on your walk or are you at home now?
I just got my Starbucks and I'm heading home, which is only a few minutes away. But
Can you give me a white mocha?
oh yeah.
Sugar-free with almond milk, okay? Hot.
I have my green tea latte with oat milk. Sounds strange, but it's actually very good.
With oat milk. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's my
oat
daughter,
milk's
Amy,
delicious.
who spent some time as a barista, who turned me on to oat milk. But I still prefer almond for most of these drinks.
I love all
Oat milk's my go-to now.
Me too. I love oat milk.
I didn't know
Hi,
you could make
Stacey.
milk out of oats.
Hello.
So, shall we have an optional round of check-ins? Or can I drive you guys again with miscellanea? I'm actually very open to this because this is one of the sessions which is technically an offer to be open. And Jaswinder had said he wanted to take it a couple of weeks ago, but I haven't seen him around.
Not today is Alex Reed, isn't it?
Is today Alex?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, according to the agenda that we worked out last week,
Okay, then go ahead. Shall we do that after an optional round of check-ins, or shall we just launch in?
well, I've got a check-in actually that involves some of that milk. I've stopped drinking milk, but not oat milk and not rice milk or almond milk for that matter, that artificial milks. But the general milk was cow-based substance, came from goats or cows. It was a dairy product. And the reason I stopped drinking that milk is because of the fat content, that's all. But there are healthy alternatives, which is great. I don't like soya milk so much because of the way it's grown, unless it's organic. So that's another point. The chemicals are giving people problems. I've seen some spam on the internet saying that penises are shrinking and men's sperm counts are dropping because of the chemicals in the environment. Well, there's a big debate going on there. Anyway, we're checking finish. Anybody else?
I don't know how they prove cause and effect on those claims.
Can we just see if
Check in real quick.
people want to check in? Kayla?
Good morning, everyone. Just finished a 1-hour hike, and I was saying to the group earlier that I think I should do this every morning. It's just better for me to be in nature at least 1 hour a day, and that's very little to ask for. But lately, life has been fine. I finally kind of got hip to the fact that I just need to have life on my terms, and made some really good decisions, and became real with myself and real with everybody else around me. And now life is kind of moving towards my direction. So like most people say, you ask the universe will provide. So that is my check-in. Over.
Awesome. Okay, I'll do a quick check-in. Really busy week. Productive, got about half done what I wanted to get done, but it was still very productive. There's some momentum around the stuff that I'm doing at work. And then I actually was ruminating about last Saturday's session, and I'll just ask, I wrote it in the text, but one of my 10 questions I asked last week to me was particularly odd. It felt odd to ask. So I was just checking to see if any of you might recall which of the 10 might actually have been a little bit odd. But I'll just leave that as a teaser.
Oh,
Okay.
gotta look for an answer now.
That's my check-in.
I saw an odd question. I can't remember which question it was, but I do remember thinking to myself, the answer to that would be arbitrary, no matter who answered it or how they answered it. You know what I mean?
Well, I didn't think any of them were odd, but if one had to stand out for me, it was the one, it was basically, what is your perception of someone else's perception of you?
Thanks for bringing that up, Stacy. I had left 10 questions at the end for my next session, but I believe that's not today. So I really like the fact that you recall that, and I'm looking forward to that discussion, hopefully next week. Unless it wanders into today. But that was actually not the question in my mind. So I'm still wondering whether it's just me or whether there was a particular signal spike that might have hit when I asked my 10 questions. Anyway, that's just my teaser.
Well, tell us. I want to know.
No. This is a teaser. This is Alex's session.
Wait a minute. I protest. Alex, do you mind if we wait for 2 minutes?
Protests are permitted. Protests are allowed, and I'm allowing interruptions in this session as well, but on the condition that they're relevant to the topic. Over.
It occurs to me that it comes down to this recurring issue of a theory of mind. What is your theory of what the other guy has on their mind? And what is your theory of what their theory of mind is about yourself? So it's this this round robin of what you think the other person has inside their head. And my observation is you're almost never anywhere close to the mark on that. It's really, really hard to get an accurate theory of mind of another person, especially if they don't disclose it.
Have you ever met somebody deeply interesting and somebody whose personality and sort of takes over the show and it consumes your interest?
Well, enigmas are very interesting. There are people who are very much inscrutable. Sam is putting up his timeout hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry I asked that teaser question because it sounds like we're kind of glommed onto that one, but I just wanted to make sure other people had a chance to do a check-in and that Alex had a chance to do his session before I drew you guys too far away off mark with that little teaser question.
So without explanation, what was the question?
No, it's not gonna be that easy, Stacy. I'm not that easy.
He's being enigmatic. He wants you to think of what's on his mind.
You're being very difficult, Sam.
He's actually enacting the very thing. It's like,
Thank you, Stacy.
Being enigmatic.
Anybody else want to check in?
I'll just check in briefly. I'm having the Easter holiday just started here, so 10 days off work for me. I'm looking forward to that. And had a 1.5 hour meditation this morning. It's really wonderful. It's not often you can sit for that long, but that was great. Try to do some more of that. Also want to try to get outside, like Kayla mentioned, but it hasn't happened today yet. It's really rainy. Yeah. Anyway, looking forward to hearing about what's it, agreements, if I remember correctly. I was also very curious about what that question was, of course. You don't want to say it, so.
I don't want to detract from Alex's session. Sorry.
Well, it is about agreements. It's about forming a barn when the foundations are laid and the rest of the structures set up for the roof to go on top. That involves quite a few agreements between the people helping, the people interested in helping. Hello, Sam's signing out.
Is that a check-in or is that launching into the topic?
It's about a response to Glenn's check-in, that's all. We're not launching into the topic until we're ready, until
Okay.
everybody's ready.
I mean, by the way, I don't myself subscribe to this, but I have heard in other circles, particularly in other GCC circles, that check-ins ought to be given a chance to have their round before responding to them. Likewise, I've heard the same thing about checkouts. The checkouts are not meant to be responded to. They're just a way for people to wrap up. I know that we have difficulty with this. I don't myself necessarily want to impose that, although I do note that it's been mentioned and enforced in other places. So I just bring it up as a matter of topic.
Looking at the screen, looking at the screen, I can see most of you checked in. And so I would say, if there's anybody else who hasn't checked in yet and willing to have a go, do so.
I'll use my time for check-in to weigh in on what Sam just said. I agree. I don't think that we should weigh in on other people's check-ins, only until everybody has a chance to go, because the people that are more polite or rule inclined wind up not getting to speak. But that's the only reason. Okay, so that was my check-in. I'm cooking in the background. Goodbye.
All right.
I'm here.
Everybody's happy with the check-ins?
I just want to say I'm happy that it's spring and I can open the window and let some fresh air in.
And leave the windows and doors open.
Yeah, except overnight, it was very windy here overnight, so I had to close the windows overnight.
I wish I was back out there in nature, where I could leave the window open and the hummingbirds would fly past. You know, you see some amazing things away from the city.
Well, I do know that some people are invisible, so let's give 3 seconds or so, 4 seconds for those people to optionally check in, and then Alex, you would have the floor after that, I would say. All right. Sounds like 4
Yeah.
seconds to me.
8 people.
Okay, well, we'll launch into this session with our topic of the day, which is agreements, specific agreements as opposed to general agreement. Because the general agreements exist on their own without any support from anyone except the people holding the general agreement. But specific agreements are different. They're like a second stage agreement or stage 2 general agreement, and that makes them special agreements, specific to a task perhaps, or a modality of thought system thinking. A specific agreement allows a machine to make a choice between A or B, 1 or 2 binary choices on machine. But if you've got a sentient intelligence in your brain and it's connected to your heart, you're making decisions that are based on a bigger picture than all that. It's a massive thing. It involves your hopes and dreams for the world and for your friends, and everything you want to see come to pass in the future. If you're thinking, if you like that, if you've got that kind of system thinking mind. And so I thought, well, if we had a network we wanted to weave. Sam, you interrupt.
Just a question. Are you hosting, moderating, and focusing, or did you want anyone else to moderate, or I just wanted to just double check on that?
Yeah, moderator would be great. If you have a moderator who's keeping an eye on people's fingers going up, that'd be good, because sometimes I'm focused on what I'm talking about and not noticing people raise their hand. That's
Anybody want to volunteer for that today? I nominate Glenn.
I was going to say, Glenn is very, very good at that. He's
Stacy.
quite
Stacy,
talented.
No, I can't. Excuse me, I can't because I can only see 4 of you at a time.
Yeah.
And you're cooking.
Well, that's taking care of itself.
I'll be looking at the screen, so I can help with that. Sure.
Okay, Glenn, you're moderating, and Alex is hosting. Sorry, Alex is focusing. Sorry, Alex is focusing.
Well, I'm laying out this groundwork for the specific degree of specificity of the topic. That's all, and then I'm opening it up to the group to go for it, because this is a subject that helps us come to ground with the barn raising idea, and it's about weaving. I think it's about weaving, not like my old idea of Bioscope, where we had the triads. It's more like weaving just with the document. And this goes closer to the Sam's idea of co-creating a community of impact. Because these links between us are only really evident to the machine AI and the algorithms and all that business if they have a URL on a document that is like a dynamic link. Then they become real things the internet can see, and the machine learning robots and spiders that are crawling the web can see them, and they get put in a database. Then they become a network. Then you've got a real network, and real networks have real power on the internet. So that's basically what I was trying to get at. We make a document, each of us, put a link on it to one of our friends in the network, and ask them to make this micro agreement to do the same thing. It's like a organically growing network of people, real people, making web pages, putting links on them. Not necessarily web pages, could be a document that you haven't posted yet, you haven't uploaded to the internet yet, but it's on your computer and it's got a link. I mean, if you give this system permission, it'll go to your computer and find that document. It'll log in. Otherwise, you can upload it to the GCC. You can upload it to your own blog. You can do all sorts of things. It's dynamic, a dynamic document for dynamic people living in a dynamic universe, creating dynamic ideas. So that's a huge dynamo going on there. So that we become weavers, and all we're doing is a simple thing with one friend or two friends. The agreement
Barry
with
has
one.
his hand up.
Barry, sorry, go for it.
Barry, you have to unmute.
I just want to point out
Yeah.
that when a person responds to somebody else, sometimes they respond to expand, extend, and endorse and enlarge an idea, and sometimes they respond to conflict with an idea to point out the weaknesses or the issues. So when people cross-link, it's not always positive reinforcement of building. Sometimes it's tearing down the other side because there's a flaw in it, and it's unpredictable which way it's going to be.
Thank
I
you.
was having a little question about this because you've described the structure of global web pages before, but now you're mentioning it in terms of agreements. I just had an idea. I'm just wondering if this is related to what you're talking about. If we imagine that a large number of people, they have their own web page, and on that web page, they say that they subscribe to a certain agreement. I agree to do, I want to do this in this kind of way, for example. And then that could be something that a machine could then at some point weave, and they would say, okay, this agreement here is supported by person A, B, C, D. Yeah. Is that a little bit of what you're also pointing towards?
Yeah. Recommendations, automatically generated recommendations based on the things you've been clicking. This is a simple device that's already in use by Facebook and others. It's analytics, but you can have more involvement in it by choosing your friends yourself, not allowing the computer, because there's some people on the web that you don't like, and you wouldn't want them linking to your page. So you've got the ownership of that. You're the sovereign entity in that network, and we all are evenly distributed. So it's a distributed sovereign network of sovereign individuals, which obviously forms a global thing that none of us have any control over.
So are you kind of talking about a decentralized Facebook, almost like each person having their own page, and then they can follow, and they can link between?
I think the development of it would unfold with the input from the users, because when something like that starts growing, it attracts the interest of the big dollars from the advertising networks, right? The Amazons, the Apples and all that. That kind of money can provide stimulus for developers to help us refine and work out the details. But it's basically the main ingredient, which is the network, is already there. We just got to make the dynamic link on it. What we're doing then is we're forming a network that can be seen by these big dollar advertisers. They know it exists. And if they want to put a banner on your page, they have to pay you a fee. That way you earn income. But it must be related to sustainable energy and things that are ecologically important to the people in the network. Not stuff that's damaging the planet, damaging the environment. So we attract green money. That's a good idea, I think. It would help. If you don't want any banners at all, if you want an ad-free site, that's cool too. Don't allow them.
I want that.
Yeah, you're the sovereign boss of your page, and the 2 people linked to it. You can have more than 2. There's no restriction, but that's a minimum I pointed out in order to make the system work. Over.
This sounds a little bit like WordPress and affiliate marketing. Is that a little bit
Yeah.
what you're talking about?
A bit like Medium too, that on Medium you can click the little hand that claps and gives a person's post more value and more significance and relevance on the network. It allows the machine language to mark those posts as significantly relevant to certain groups or certain people in the network, and they'll pop up on the left-hand side of your screen as announcements, or what's happening in the network, what's relevant, what's trending, and that's not hard to do. With the people doing it now with their private little small home networks using web programming languages like Python and Rust and Sonar, and there's hundreds of them. There's an automatic one. we love the automatic ones. And you can talk into your microphone and the computer will build the web page. The computer will build the network, obeying the instructions or giving you error messages saying, you repeat that word or didn't understand that word or whatever, and you're training it. You're training the AI machine language to understand you better and more quickly and rapidly create what you want accurately. Over.
So one thing I was wondering about is, it sounds like what you're describing already to some degree exists, but
Yeah.
Are you envisioning some kind of a new technological platform, or are you just envisioning?
It's I'm taking it away from the power structures. I'm giving it to the people. Giving it to the people. Handing over the power to the people. That's why it's called P2TP.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just under the underlying structures, P2P, peer-to-peer. But with there's 3 of us here, me and Colin and Joel all play the guitar. Sam plays a instrument. I think it's a huge violin. But you see, talented peers getting together gives you some sense of focus and identity at least. They're not just the people you know. They're not just other pages out there who are anonymous or something, or people you've never met or never spoken to. See, on Facebook, I've got 1,000, 1,200 friends, and I don't know hardly any. I probably know about 3 of them. Yeah, that's an issue.
Exactly. So, on the question of agreements, in the context of barn racing, for example. So, what is it what would be your ideas regarding that? Do you see, for example, us posting some agreements on our pages that we already have, link between them, or is it that kind of an idea?
Yes, you've got an agreement to make this page and put a link on it to a friend you like, and you've talked to them. You've talked to that person and made the agreement between you and that person. And the ideas that you put on your page and they put on their page are ideas that are great. A lot of them are voted up, end up in the main page hub. The hub is a links plus page. So everybody's agreement page is also linked to the network hub page, which is in the cloud, a virtual page in the cloud, like a database, because that could grow huge and need to be split up. I think hopefully it wouldn't happen, but if it's processing too much data, it'd need to be split up to different servers. But the thing is, that network has a hub, and that makes a huge difference, because without the hub, it's just random pages, not linked. But it's still decentralized. There's no central processing unit. It's just all pages that are connected by hyperlinks. This is like Doug Englebart's vision when he was creating the finding devices and he's inventing hypertext markup language with friends. They're all conversing with each other. I'd love to hear Barry's thoughts on that issue and others. Over.
Yeah, Barry, you wrote something in the chat there. What are you thinking?
Yeah, this is sort of a tangential issue, but it struck me as kind of interesting. I was watching a video about a group who were rescuing predatory cats, the big predatory cats who had been in zoo. The cats had been in zoos and they had developed ornery traits, ornery character. And so they were removed from the zoos and they brought into the sanctuary. And there was this couple who were working with these ornery cats from zoos and sort of rehabilitating them. And they had one cat in particular, a black panther, who was really just unreachable. It just hid in its night cage and would never come out. It was just completely antagonistic to humans. And they were at their wits' end because their ability to relate to these predatory cats was just stymied by this one particular black panther. So they brought in an expert who was reputed to be able to communicate with animals. Had sort of, this is something you'd call woo, this ability to communicate with an animal by some process other than what you'd expect. And this woman sat in front of this black panther and in some way read it, if you can understand what I mean, and was interpreting what the cat was communicating to this woman. And she described a whole bunch of concepts that she was getting from this cat. And literally overnight, they brought this cat out of whatever its trauma was and rehabilitated it, and it became very sociable. But what was interesting is that this particular video was one of these sponsored YouTube videos, so it kept being interrupted by commercials. And the commercial was from a guy named Jonathan Boyd, who was teaching what he claimed was a radical method of learning the guitar. And his point was that when you learn the guitar, you learn that these frets divide the strings into these discrete sections, and that you have to play a note, you have to press the string within the fret to get a single note. And he pointed out that when people learn to play the guitar, they play very mechanically. Just, mechanically press the fret and strum the note, and you get a very mechanical sounding music that's not very fluid. It doesn't have any emotion into it. And he says there's a way to map the length of the guitar, so you ignore the frets and you sort of think of it as a continuum, as a continuous map, and you generate more fluid, emotionally interesting music, almost like a Hawaiian guitar, which doesn't have frets, and Sam plays the violin, which doesn't have frets. And so because you don't have frets, you can put your finger anywhere along the length and you can modulate the tone much more fluidly, and therefore you you can induce much more emotional content than you can with this classical sort of mechanized fret. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Sam has his hand up. Do you want me to stop, Sam?
No, I'll speak after you.
Okay, so anyhow, so what was interesting was there was these two videos. One was this story about these predatory cats that were sort of being tamed and socialized, and this whole thing about making music more fluid and emotionally meaningful and less mechanical sounding. And I thought both of these stories were sort of somehow complementary analogs of the same fundamental issue: how to make things more alive, more real, and less sort of stuck. Go ahead, Sam.
So I'll respond to the second point first. This one about frets or no frets on instruments. it may seem to you that that's the case, that because you've got these frets on guitars, you only have certain fixed pitches for each of those strings. And while that's true, and while the violin gives you much finer control over intonation, it is still possible to extract much emotion and much musicality from instruments that only have fixed pitch. For example, the piano. The piano does not allow you to go up and down by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, hertz on a note. And yet, look at the emotions that can be created using a piano. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily that one feature of it, okay? The second one is, okay, and this is an example of me actually not piling on to reinforce, but just introducing a slightly different perspective on what was being said. And the first one, God, I forget the first one now. What was the first point?
About the cats?
Yes, yes. I think that so much of us think that communication happens with verbal speech, and that it's all within this, 4K hertz of, signals in the air transmitted via the atmosphere, whether it's, intermediated by electronics or not. And yet so much, as the Panther found out, is nonverbal, non-auditory, that there's the sense of someone's calmness, peacefulness, demeanor, serenity, openness, inquisitiveness, safety, etc., which you don't get if you're just focused on words. Not quite so easily. I mean, some people can. Those are very effective orators. But otherwise, it's a lot more whole body communications. All the way down to posture, speed of movement, the path you take to approach someone, whether or not you're actually speaking, whether or not you're listening, all of that, which I think is then appreciated by these animal whisperers and dumbfounds those who don't have that sense. I'm not trying to make a conclusive point. I'm just trying to add another perspective to this particular interaction that you described. Over.
Vice has
Peace.
please have to unmute. Please.
Yes. Well, I had a talk with a blackbird after snowfall. So he was sitting in a tree. He was not alone, actually. So I had food in my hand and was trying to connect with the blackbird. Then I walked away to an area where I knew where I would be able to lay the food, and the animal passed me by, making some noise also. So he came from the back on the right-hand side. So, and so message was well taken. And that, well, it was a dire situation because there was snow, so the bird couldn't find food. And I'd see the bird sitting near the shopping center, nobody giving food. So it was nice. So to understand birds, it's easy in the Netherlands because you have more than 100 years environmental organization for the protection of birds. So it's inside the culture. So it's easy to talk with the birds, to understand, actually, I want to say. So then the birds might understand also if you go to them and show interest.
Should also mention, since David, you arrived, that Alex had some ideas today to talk about agreements and specific and general agreements, and he described this a global network of web pages that's decentralized, and I think that the little theme we came into now speaks about other kinds of communication that might not be so easy to capture in those kind of web pages, but might be going on other frequencies.
Thanks for the update. Are we early tonight? Was it a different time, or is Just the
Well,
normal
it
time.
was a time difference a couple of weeks ago. So it started, yeah, 40 minutes ago.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We're on daylight savings time. It'll go back to the usual time differential this coming Sunday when the rest of the world goes on summertime.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks, guys. Luckily, I was talking to Thies and he mentioned that you'd started, which is it's the only reason I'm up. I
Okay.
just wanted to catch up. I'll give a quick update if that's okay. I've been diagnosed with a autoimmune disease. So my immune system's about rock bottom. So that's why I've been experiencing such unusual and weird and wonderful things. So I've pretty much been about as sick as you can get. I've been picking everything up. I had cold sores all over my body a week ago, and just things that are trivial have completely leveled me. But anyway, I'll let everything go back to the conversation. Apologies for that. Just giving you a heads up of where I am. So I keep getting boils and all sorts. I've got one under my arm, and I'm sleeping about 20 hours a day at the moment, and it's given me enough energy. On Barry's advice, just sleep when you feel like it, and it's working, Barry. Thank you. I've got to go for tests. I'm on a fast at the moment for 3 days to zero my liver and kidneys so that I can do a test to see which medication I can take. And I think I'm going to have to go on to antiretrovirals to start with, and then look at alternatives afterwards, which will stabilize everything, and then I can move forward from there. So back to the conversation, just a quick heads up. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dave. I was trying to sleep the other day, couldn't sleep, but and so I got up. I forgot about trying to sleep. I got up and started playing on the computer, and that was about an hour later. I started feeling tired again, and then I really had to sleep. But that's it. If you can't sleep, don't bother trying. You get up and do something. And, so it's good to hear that you've got on top of what's wrong with you. All you need now is a more accurate method of avoiding the introduction of viruses and germs that will cause more problems.
If your diagnosis turns out to be specifically CFIDS, chronic fatigue immune disorder syndrome, I have a correspondent whose daughter was diagnosed with that as a teenager. He's a retired professor of psychology, and so he's quite familiar with treatments for CFIDS. And if it turns out that that's what you're diagnosed with, I could put you in touch with Dave Landrigan because he's quite knowledgeable about treatments for CFIDS.
Could I make a request? Who's hosting today, and who is recording? That's the question.
Sam is recording, and yeah, it's sort of Alex is hosting, and I'm helping him a little bit.
We're in the Sam's
Sam?
Zoom room.
Sam,
Yes,
could I?
Sam.
Sorry, guys.
He might be feeding his dog.
Sam, are you present at this moment? Okay, I'll wait till Sam comes back. I have a request. So I cannot see him. So if someone could inform me when he comes back, would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Right. Thanks, guys.
He reads the chat. When he comes back, he'll read this message in the chat.
Yeah, well, we'll say when he comes back. So yeah, so Alex, where do you want to go from here? Was there anything you want to continue
No,
with?
I've got an opportunity to open the session to general barn raising conversation.
And Sam is back now. Yep. So yeah, David had a request for you. Okay.
Sam?
Yes. Sorry, I was getting something.
How are you?
Feeling quite good, actually. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. Can I make a very, very unusual request? Could I ask you just to stop recording for a few minutes so I could just have a quick sort of more personal chat with you guys?
Okay, hang on one second. Let me turn it off. There we go. Okay, we're back. Thanks, David.
And I've finished this presentation about the specific agreements. The background image now represents the weaved network of people who have added a friend to the document and uploaded the document to the internet. Anyway, so that's the idea. That sort of thing is where we can start. It's doable and it's scalable, and it will attract investment from green tech energy companies and also, you know, entrepreneurs and philanthropists in the future. As it gets bigger, it'll attract more interest as it grows. It's a marketing dynamic that we have to accept in the modern world. Over. Back to the
yeah, I was
back to the
wondering
barn.
one question. What you mentioned sounded to me quite similar to WordPress and all kinds of people having their web pages there. Is this something that you could imagine just using WordPress or using those things, or do you think that some new decentralized like blockchain thing perhaps needs to be
There's an ethical dimension with WordPress and Medium and those sites because they charge subscription fees to the users. And they even increase that amount that they charge depending on the level of services they offer that they want to sell you. I don't like that model. So, you know, it's, a free open network is the model I'm thinking of that does not charge fees, but earns income from banner ads if those users who host the banner ads choose to do so. Decentralization. The income's going to the users who agree to the banner ads. You know, those who don't want them, they've got plenty of money. They don't need the money.
I think Sam has something here.
Yeah.
Sam has something here.
I wasn't aware that WordPress actually charges, because I think I have an account on WordPress.org and I've never been paying them. So I don't know if it's really true. On the other hand, you know, those servers do require electricity. They do require space. They do require maintenance of other kinds. So somebody somewhere is paying quote unquote costs of keeping the network up. So I'm curious whether or not this free model scales as we think it does. Because at some point, you know, somebody's got to pay for some machine that gets plugged in somewhere. Over.
My WordPress is also free, and WordPress reserves the right to insert ads. Now, they don't insert ads on mine because I don't have that much traffic, so there's nobody clicking on it. But they leave a little space saying, we could possibly putting an ad here unless, Mr. Court, you want to pay us more money and we'll take away these. So they're actually advertising to me, promoting, you know, that I pay the money so that I don't have these little ads. But I just let them put these little ads up, these little promotional things. And
yeah, we can have control over who puts the ad there, who's the person behind the advertisement. On like you can't do that on WordPress. They choose who's putting the ads.
And I think the same is true on YouTube. That if they put up ads, you don't get any control over who the ads are. Yeah. But that's the price you pay for a free service.
But on YouTube, you also have a premium service, which I would strongly recommend to anyone who uses YouTube.
Right. Alex, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
So I have WordPress, I have all my links, I have my own thing on GitHub, I have various other domains, I've got my Workflowy, I've got the Google Docs, I've got a number of other resources I've shared around. I'm curious whether your pages have linked to the things that I put up. And so I'm looking at that as an example or even an exemplar. Over.
Yeah, I've got a link to Links Plus that points to the community of impact, and this diagram behind me is to the specific decentralized network, which is the special people who want change in the world without corporatized capitalism, for the benefit of the environment and sustainable energy and all that sort of thing. We've got to clean up the plastic in the oceans and all the rest of it. So there's trillions of dollars available from investment corporations who do a lot of philanthropy work. And that money can be used to help organizations who are interested in these kind of networks to grow.
I think David had his hand up. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind whenever we're talking about money in the monetary system is that everything has a price, because natural resources are being depleted to the point where they are no longer capable of being free. Everything's being restricted in a state of complete abundance, which is allowed through the natural growth of communities, nature around us, and immersement into that, decentralized governance, and that isn't based on monetary factorization or control. Everything would eventually become free again. So if we are working towards that in our minds and hearts,
David, there is a sound in the background.
I've got a speaker on because I'm finding it difficult to hear everybody, and I can't turn it off. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Excellent. Did everybody get what I said up till now, or do I need to repeat?
I got it, I think. Yeah, you said that if I heard you right, you basically said that there needs to be real abundance before we can have these decentralized networks. So that's sort of what you're pointing towards, that it's a scarcity-based model.
So
there's a
the
cost.
monetary system. Sorry.
There's a cost.
The monetary system. Sorry, Alex.
Alex, yeah.
You mentioned the cost involved, and there's always been a cost involved in different services and things, and different industries and products. There's a cost involved, and now there's an environmental cost involved in industries and services. So we've got an environmental cost without the energy we're using for our networks. So we're not doing mining. We're not doing Bitcoin mining, for example. We can do blockchain because that doesn't involve an exponential increase in energy consumption. Blockchain is an algorithm that will allow you to encrypt links in a distributed network. So without the mining, there's less environmental damage. So that brings that cost down. And in oil industries and in old fossil fuel industries, their costs are going through the roof because of the value of a tree. So is that where you're coming from? Over.
Roughly, yes. Everything that is a depletive state of factorization and monetarization. You see, everything only began to cost when money was introduced. We can actually start new economies that run on energy flow, on biodiversity, so that when the flip over from track to track happens, it's not going to fall away and create great rifts and earthquakes and floods in the systems across the world. You see, whether the monetary system's there or not, it just creates flow of energy. So the fact of the matter is, we probably just need impetus to do so. So if we have communities, intentional communities that are using alternative flows of energy, the same resources will be available. It will swap to a stage where this growth still carries on, but it will be exponential. Instead of being a limited growth, it'll be an exponential growth. The main thing is that we do our inner work, because if we're doing this from a state of lack or a state of fear or a state of conditioning, preconditioning from our schooling systems, etc., from our governance systems, then we'll get back into the same state again in a very short period of time. So one of the most important things is to do the inner work, and that could be as groups. And I was going to say that GCC is one prime space for this, because basically what you guys have been doing for 3 years is holding space for each other to learn, to grow, to communicate honestly, to not judge, to give an open, safe space where people can blow out, fall out, come back together, work through all of these issues and problems. You've created a microcosm of healing, basically. And it's now getting to a stage where we are ready to lift and do something that is real time. We have left the city square, we have entered the garden, whatever analogy each of us has given, it's pertinent to each other, and we allow this. I don't say it's not a city square or blah, 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 blah. We can see each other's value, we can see each other's language, and we can see what it means to each other in the healing process, and we give that space, we're present. And it's a beautiful space to be, and it's lovely to see this unfolding and be part of this unfolding. So again, I'm honoured to be here. Sorry, Alex.
I think that hopefully partly answers Sam's question that you gave to me as well. And it's the link. The link on one of my nodes goes to the friends I chose. I chose a couple of friends to link to, because those links create that web. Those links are what they're dynamic links on the page, and you know, you've got other things on your page. You can have your page linked to a subfolder of other pages that you're interested in. Or you can create more pages yourself and put them on the tab menu and on your page. Some people create a website, other people create a blog. But if it's a page you create, you've got a document. You've documented your involvement with the network. That's part of your weaving micro agreement. Just like this community of impact, in a way, I think. So, you know, if you look at my website, you'll find there's a links plus tab in the menu, and that's got a lot of links on it that I've found interesting. And so it's working in that sense. It's just up to the individuals who are watching this to say to themselves, if not me, who? If not now, when? If not here, where? We are acting by creating, we're co-creating this network of people power, people who are interested in ecologically sustainable future for the planet and the species that are still surviving. The mass extinction event. Over.
Well, it seems to me that it's kind of the beginning of an answer. At the same time, this is a rather long-term project in some sense. I see the same possibility of these intentional communities forming, and holding space like we're doing here is like a kind of an early stage, and it's an essential stage, and then it can expand from there. For example, in this space, there's an interest in creating some a new understanding and sense-making, co-visioning, knowledge sharing, which can go together with just the personal work of each person, and can go together with more informal friendships. And then at some stage, there can also be economies similar to barter economies. Then if you want to scale it even further, I guess what I'm saying is that what I see so far is prototypes of kind of super communities. So it's communities that do many things. So it's like one process and lots of results that come out of the process, and it can be harmonized. Many of those super communities can become, many of the communities can become a larger super community, etc. And at some stage, it can become an alternative economic system that can eventually possibly replace the entire monetary system. But it's like a very big project, right? So let's not forget that we're on a very early stage. Yeah, what do you think, David? You have to unmute, David. Yeah.
I think one of the, you see, we always look at the alternative instead of transmutational aspects, because once we change the mindset, we don't have to literally jump rails. We just look at what we have, and it transmutes to something different. Now, this intentional community idea is something wonderful because you can create your own intentional community with just you. You change your mindset and you detach yourself from the cyber nipple of rape and pillage and holding information. And you start to look at free source, and you start to look at sharing, and you stop giving your trade secrets to those that are going to hoard them and keep them, so that the world becomes a worse and darker place. And you learn who you can truly share them with. You learn when you're sowing your pearls before swine, and when you're actually working your wisdom to others that think similarly, because they start to sow pearls toward you. And it's all about that basic intent for a better world for everybody, for our children's children, and for the ancestors that have brought us this far. How many people have poisoned themselves with toxins to find the healing plants? How many people have gone through hell to bring us to a state of heaven? And now we allow this to be scientifically proven to be wrong and unsafe and toxic by companies that are buying results from universities because they've got a full wing that they bought, Carnegie's, Rockefellers, etc., etc. So science, religion, the governance system, and our monarchies have all been infiltrated by this false monetary system, this schism or this parasitic ideal of separation, and this factorization of everything that is natural, denature, and of all of us. We're all indigenous people to this earth. You know, you check us all out. We've got earth, wind, fire, and water. We've got magnesium, calcium. We can prove that we're from this planet, and that we are sovereign, and that we are part of it, and that all of it belongs to us. And all of the bullshit is mental. Masculinization.
So it has to start there then. Mental transformation, basically, seems like the essence of it. That's what it all depends on, right?
And they are free sources, not resources. This idea of redoing things and de-doing them and class, etc. These are all parts or nuances of the control system. It's like a program that's now falling apart as we see how it was programmed in the first place. And the thing is, the magic is that we can program on multiple levels, and we're not actually commanding the computer or the Qantas to do this. We're actually working in absolute unison. We're sharing consciousness with the Qantas, with God, with the intelligence that is, because we realize that we are facets of it, that we are not refractions of light. We are free fractions of all light. We are all phenomena. And how we display ourselves at this moment in time is our choice. How comfortable we feel with our expansiveness, with our cooperation, with our collaboration. These are our own micro choices. So this of agreed and agreement, which is an intentional greed, we need to go. We align choice and share consciousness fully to a point where everything ascends or expands, vastens. We deepen our roots into the earth as we flow out into the universe, so that we are grounded. We are feeding nutrients into the planet that sustains and gives us our life and our ability to grow and vasten and ascend. And then we open up in the vastness of it all, feeding back in a loop system, in a spiral of expansion, inward and outward. And we've chosen to do this here. We've chosen to come to this place as friends and give the space to do this. It's a magical and beautiful thing as a universe comes to life, as an omniverse begins to form. And as we move into that space, as bigger, brighter, more beautiful, more honorable, kinder spirits.
We will need agreements for quite a period of time, it seems to me. For a larger society, we're also going to need laws. We're even going to need law enforcement. Even if it shouldn't be necessary, eventually, let's say if we're all on a high enough level of consciousness, we probably don't need any laws, don't need any law enforcement, anything like that. But it seems very clear that if we want to build that consciousness, that there has to be some kind of a building process that can happen and that can coexist with the existing institutions, with law enforcement, with people who are relatively corrupt or traumatized or whatever you want to call it, and that these have to somehow coexist for a certain time. This is the big challenge. We need some kind of a growth process which can coexist with the existing structures, even if we wish the existing structures wasn't necessary, but they will certainly be necessary for a while.
There's a growing trend amongst internet users to power their machines with solar panels and sustainable generation, wind and solar, and people who live near rivers can have tidal energy. You know, I've seen some designs on the internet and even thought up my own of this big barrel going across a river. It's a paddle wheel, but it goes from one bank to the other, and the river flowing down and it's turning this huge paddle, enormous paddle wheel that goes right across. There's a gap in the center for boats to get through and fish and things. It doesn't hurt the fish. And it turns a huge generator via gears, generates quite a bit of power, as much as a windmill. And they can go up and down the river. You can put as many of them as you like along the river. Don't look very nice, but you know, they're clean green energy. Over.
Barry, I said you wrote something really nice. A link should be a pearl that leads to more useful information, a gateway to deeper insight. That is, we need more pearly gates. I think that ties a little into this theme of sense-making, co-creation, and co-visioning. That if we can use the spaces to also create wisdom and understanding, and possibly also beautiful artifacts, which has been an idea, then we can have this sort of a magic space that can create these pearls, pearly gates. That's a good way of putting it. And then that sort of fits into what Alex talks about with all these links, because that's we talked about that before, that sort of Alex's model, sort of the macro level links, but there has to be something in the links, and it can't just be rubbish, right? It has to be something substantial.
I don't think there has to be something substantial. If all you're doing is creating a network, it's not designed for anything else but so that you can see it on the map. Each node represents one of the members of the group, because you've put up a document on the web. The document puts you on the web. put you in the network, because that document you make, you add one link to a friend, somebody in the group you like. In the old model, I used to have this. There used to have to be a local link to somebody in your area you knew, and you'd met. But I'm thinking that's not going to work. So that link to the people you put on your document can be anyone on the web in the world, provided you confirm with them that on Zoom or somewhere that they are in fact a real person. Otherwise, we get machines doing it, and for the advertisers putting their nose in where it's not wanted.
Links can also lead to what people have been long calling going down the rabbit hole. So if the link takes you down the rabbit hole and you spend months and months and months exploring the rabbit hole and coming up with nothing constructive at the end, that was not a pearly gate. That was the gate to the opposite direction.
That's a link you wouldn't put on your page.
But if you put a link to anything, then half of them or more than half of them are going to be links that lead to rabbit holes.
Yeah, well, you can put a link to anything if that's what you want to do. But
well, people will put links to rabbit holes. They will.
Wise people won't do that.
Correct, but wise people are in the minority. Maybe what, 5% of the population are sages,
right.
If that.
Right. Bring on the minority.
I have an idea. If intention's the important thing within this, each node or each person could be classically intended to be an energy expansion hub, so that the information that is being guided or flowing from along the lines of contact would then be taken in, expanded from the knowledge that the person has, and then passed on the other links, like a mind coming to life and the neurons firing. So maybe the planet is basically a mind forming. So we are the nodes, or the neural networks firing. And as our vastness increases, then the vibration of the planet would increase dramatically. And if we're all linked, then everything would upgrade simultaneously. So say if I suddenly learned something and we are in complete full connection, then Barry and Alex and Glenn and everyone else would instantaneously, or near enough instantaneously, wake up to this. Now, if you imagine that those threads take in every human life on the planet in a computational way, and we're using devices at this time, eventually that energy would become so subtle and so vast, and we would become so subtle and so vast that that energy would no longer need computational devices to channel it. So basically, telepathy, etc., would be a reality. Now, I've experienced points, and I know people will call it woo-woo and blah, 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 but I've experienced things that I can't explain. And I know that this is real. And whether that's a placebo because there were so many people there doing it, and no matter, the information that was conveyed and picked up was exactly the same as I believe was conveyed and it was picked up. So we're going towards a state where the network that we saw behind Alex will all be light. There will be no space as such. There will be a vastening and an enlightening of all processes to a point where flow and isness is just natural. And that point, that exponential point of growth, then just carries on.
Yeah, well, that sounds advanced, though. I mean, that would be sometime in the future, when people have come to a much higher level.
Yeah, if we can keep a focus on the possibilities and realize where we can go with this in the primary foundations, and we can make those foundations light enough, bright enough, flowful enough, and I think that's the thing where if we're non-attached to the outcome fully. We allow it to flow to where it needs to go, yet we have an idea of where we're going. It is Paradise Earth or ascension of the galaxy or ascension of the... we can use this in daily terms in our own lives to work through our own processes, knowing that we're supported. We've got a place to vent this and talk about this as high and crazy as we want, and right down to the nitty gritty and getting down to the brass tacks of it, you know, picking worms out of poo to go fishing. Then we can go through our processes together, knowing that we're going to be supported through this, and we can say anything we want. We can go as crazy and vast as we want, yet we can go as deep and realistic and brass tacks as we wish to as well.
Yeah. And on that note, I should mention that I'm going to have a session either next week or the week after, where that's an occasion for us to really... That's an opening to be able to think as big as we want about what could be in the future. I think that is an essential piece, because if we don't have some kind of a larger vision, which by its nature is vastly bigger than we're used to thinking, that I don't think it's going to work. Let's put it that way. I think that's an essential piece. But then on the way to that, let's say maybe one day, we can all speak telepathically, but on the way to that, it certainly seems like a very good intermediate stage if we can have a network of these pages where the page represents a person. So as I hear it now, what Alex is speaking about sounds similar to this idea of profiles that we've talked about many times, which is basically the name of one person, and then around that person there's a certain, let's call it a cloud of information, certain information, and they can then link from that cloud to other clouds in an organic way, and it would be natural. We can almost see it as a planet. So like, imagine planet Alex Reed, planet David Middlemith, planet Stacy Ross, planet Fries van der Veer, right? And on that planet, it's a virtual planet, but it exists in cyberspace, and you can access it, and then you can also feed it with so it can be a creative place where that person's knowledge also develops, and they can have poetry, and they can have their favorites, links, whatever it could be, but that planet sort of represents their learning journey as well. So it's if I understand it like that, and then I put that into the web behind Alex, then I think this is beginning to make some more sense for me. But it's still very big, obviously.
Can I say something about that? I was thinking of it along the lines of clicking links that lead to spam or malware or disabled crippleware, and that is that if you right-click the mouse on a link, a box will open with a thumb up or a thumb down, and that way you can mark that link. You can give that link a value according to whether or not you thought it was spam or something useful. So if you see a link and you look at the thumbs count next to it, it might say 100 up, 20 down. Some people didn't like it. Or it might be 300 up and only 1 down, which means that looks like a good link to investigate. Over.
Yeah. Stacy.
So first I want to say that I don't understand half of what you've been talking about for the whole call when it comes to, the algorithms or anything like that. But I do want to put out a couple of ideas that maybe you guys can incorporate, because you know what you're talking about. the challenge I see, some of this goes to what Barry was talking about in terms of rabbit holes. And now, you know, T's put in the chat about the thumbs up and the thumbs down. People put thumbs up for different reasons. Sometimes they put the thumbs up to acknowledge that they've read something. Sometimes it's that they agree with it. Sometimes it's not. But I think that we don't spend enough time looking at the oddities. You know, we're focused on the sameness. And the problem is it's those outlying things that we can learn the most from. And I don't know if I'm articulating what I want to say.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, then I'll stop.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking the same. That's not easy. The thumb up, like that can so easily be manipulated. But what if we don't need the thumb at all? That's my first thought. What if we could have a system where we don't need that at all?
What about it? What about if there was something that we could do with like colors of agreement or something that signified intensity?
That's a good idea. A pendulum arrow pointing to the green or the red.
Well, I wouldn't even do green and red because there's too much connotation with that.
What are you thinking about, Stacey? Intensity?
I don't know, because I'd have to understand more about what more about what you guys are talking about too.
What about something like a rainbow spectrum, maybe?
It'll work because the reason it'll work is because more than 90% of the people in the world have a brain connected to their heart and they think about sustainability. So if it's pointing to the green, it means they like it.
Wait a minute, say that again. I don't know if what was that statistic you just said?
Over 90%. In other words,
think about you think
No,
over 90% of people think about sustainability?
I think only 10% don't care what happens.
And I disagree.
Well, it might be different. If it's at 9%,
unfortunately, I disagree.
Okay. A lot of people do disagree, and it's because I'm wrong. It might be 9%, but it is a percentage. You agree that it is a percentage?
This is what I would say, Alex. I would say in GCC, that's probably a very accurate number. If you looked at the world in general, it's going to be very different. If you're looking in the United States, which is where I live, unfortunately, I think you have that percentage flipped.
Do you think that if we just keep it to caring about the larger picture, wouldn't that cover most people?
I think that we have to learn how to think like the people who don't agree with us think, instead of using the methods that got us to believe a certain way on them. So, for example, I heard there was something was said about the chemicals causing low sperm count. Talk about how it's going to affect somebody's masculinity. That will get them concerned more than what it's going to do to the water supply or to other people.
But is the science valid, or is it just speculation?
Say it again.
Appeal to their ego.
Yeah, Barry's
and their
asking
selfishness.
But selfishness, right? But like if I'm selfish, then I want an environment where I can breathe. So,
but you're not thinking. I'm sorry. A lot of people that are selfish, they're not thinking that far out. They're thinking about what's in front of them right at this moment.
Sure.
We've been sold a poison pill of consumerism, right? Now, so this puts us into the state of drug addicts. So we don't care where we get our next fix from, as long as we get our next fix. Now, money is the major crack cocaine of the issue, and then stuff is the next. And we've been sold a dream that the more stuff we have, the happier we'll become, which allows us to be separated more and more and more. So we have to first of all appeal to the mind of crack addicts, and we have to pull people round from that space. So we have to speak on that level. We have to communicate on that level with giving people the ability to choose honestly from that perspective, because everything else is a dupe. Everything else, we've been promised these things and none of them are true. So we have to first of all speak on the same level. We secondly have to then give an honest choice, and we have to make it attractive. And the first thing I would say is choose your audience, because you're not going to go to the pits of hell on your first angelic flight and try and convert Satan himself. It's not really a good idea. So you start in a space where people are somewhat like-minded, and you gauge, observe, and work within those parameters until you're pretty much going to guarantee your first couple of successes, because you need to move forward positively. If you go and do something that's too big, you're going to get the wind knocked out of you in 2 seconds flat, and you're going to have to go back to stage one and begin again. So pick your fights, choose your audience. Those
If I
that are
could add,
somewhat. Sorry,
Stacy,
go
I
on,
think,
Steve.
yes, I think
Sorry.
Stacy has some more. Yeah.
no, I just want to add to what David's saying about choosing the audience. If you could imagine that you're speaking to two audiences at once and build in something for each and blend them.
We're capable of multifaceted and multidimensional communication. And the more that we use that muscle, Stacey, I 100% agree with you. And start at the beginning, and as we progress, move through that. So eventually we can feel like we're talking to 3 audiences concisely without becoming schizophrenic. And then 4, and then 5. We can then engage on a vaster scale. But yes, definitely.
But that's
Push the
also when
boundaries.
David, that's also when we need to recognize that all of those audiences are not all the same, even within themselves.
Yeah.
And
Of
that,
course.
to me, is the biggest challenge. We need to have more movement, because not everybody that thinks one thought also thinks the same as all those other people when it comes to a different topic.
And also, I would claim almost all people do not agree with themselves. They have several sides in our nature which are contradictory. I think it's very important to remember that when we're thinking about the big populations out there that we only hear about through the news, or we see comments that they make on a social media site, we're not seeing who they really are. We're probably seeing one role that they're playing, and it's not even a real role. It's a very artificial role. It's not really a role that they personally care deeply about. And as far as who they really are, that's a vast mystery. You can see someone comment on a Facebook post and they fit perfectly a stereotypical profile, but that profile can just be a superficial cover. And it's like if they're just put into a different context, a real context, they might shed all that in an instant. And they might just dare to show their true self, but that true self doesn't come forth at all in the existing networks. And that's one of the reasons why I think this idea of profiles is so important, because it might be a way to learn more about who people really are. Like I don't at all buy that 90% don't care about the environment. I think that's total nonsense. I think that maybe they act as if they don't. Maybe they even say that they don't. I think it's just not true. I think it's artificial roles that people are placed in. There's a collective madness that's happening. I guess that's what I'm getting to.
Well, let me just say that in the States, they don't care enough to change their behavior. So they might care, and it might be like, yeah, I wish it wasn't like that. But when it comes to dollars and cents, they don't care enough to change their behavior yet.
Yeah.
David?
I think the fundamental of this group and the ability to heal deeply begins to give us empathy to a level where we can start to read each other. And the fact of the matter is that once we start to let our guard down through trust, we can read each other accurately. Now, this is the starting point of being able to work with individuals and groups, because we can see through the programming. You see, we're doing our own inner work to a deeper level so that we can understand rather than looking outward and understanding. We can understand our perspective, and we can touch the hand of God within, or the universe, or light, or blah, 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 blah. I don't want to get into a discussion of the nuances of this, but we start to touch creation, we start to touch life within. And then we, as within, so throughout, then we can start to touch life on the outer levels accurately, because we have our center. We are honest and authentic and feel safe in the environment and know that we can come back to a space like this to say, oh shit, I've had a bad day. Or our conversations will convey that information. Everything that I've spoken about tonight will be coming to terms with the issue that I found 2 days ago, the hope that I'm building, etc., etc. So it will be geared towards that healing somehow, and that energy. It will be geared towards that care being given out for other people.
Well, some of the
And all
things
of
that we've been, sorry, some of the things
Yeah,
that we've been speaking about, like in unblocking and, with Barry or Doug, has to do with ethics that need to be reintroduced. And maybe within the group is where it has to start, because we collectively need work as well.
yes, more than ever. If we want to do this truly, we have to be completely, brutally honest and brutally kind at the same time, and brutally open. We have to realize what judgment does in our own sphere and in the sphere of the group, and how releasing that can change the entire energy and can catalyze vast amounts of healing, because we're all damaged more than we can possibly imagine. We can deny it, we can pretend that we're not, but damn it, we bloody well are. Because otherwise the world would be healed and this would be already paradise. So that's the proof of the pudding.
Well, I'm just going to throw out one more word, and that's forgiveness, because I think that we need to do a lot around that word.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Alex, got something.
I'm thinking about the people in Flint, Michigan. Compared them to the people in California, San Francisco, I think you'd get a vastly different opinion on what's economically viable in this environment and what's not. So the ethics of the government, the ethics of the governors in Michigan and the things they're doing there to the people is shocking. It's degrading, it's humiliating, and it's corruption to the core. So if we want that to end, that sort of thing, it's going to take a bit of effort on each of our part. And I think a document is a great way to get it started. A document with a hypertext link on it that gives us a start to it's a planting of a seed, which creates a sprout, and the thing will begin to grow if you want it.
Just one little question I had, Stacey. You said that they don't care enough to change their behavior. Do you think they would do that if they believe their behavior change would make a difference?
Yes, I think
Because-
that, and I think that's a big part of it. I think that most people think it won't make a difference anyway.
Yeah, because that's sort of what my impression is, that there's this disempowering narrative that whatever I do doesn't make a big difference on the big picture anyway. So I just have to, you know, look after myself here and now, one step ahead of the other. And but maybe that's where David's perspective really becomes relevant, because if we really have this story in our midst of how large the possibility is, it might change things.
Yeah, I think another thing that plays into it as well is their disconnection from the rest of it. Like,
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact of the matter is, you see, authority, what is that? Someone else writes your life journey. They are the authors. We've given our pen and our hand to someone else. So to empower, we have to take back our pen and hand and begin to write our own life journeys. But we have to know who we are. What has been written over the truth of who we truly are, of what we truly are, the vastness of what we truly are. Because every star that's ever existed has a minute part in this earth. And we've been told that we're nothing more than cattle, that we live in a world filled with war and hate and pain and suffering, and that we'll never make it past the lower class, middle class, or upper class. And then there's an elitist class, which, unless you're born into, you can never make. Now, we know that this is absolute rubbish, and that we're made of greater things. All life, all light is everything that we are. And that light can brighten eternally. There is no end to the vastness of everything. It's eternal. It goes on forever. So once it begins, it self-perpetuates, then selflessly perpetuates, and then it increases vastness. We've been played down, narrowed, and spun backwards into oblivion purposefully by something or someone. And it's time that that changes.
I think this is at the heart of the issue. Yeah, Stacey, what do you?
I was going to say another challenge, another problem we face is that people have been desensitized through their need. I mean, and it's understandable, you know, since it's very hard for sensitive people to, you know, to get by. I can speak as a sensitive person. It's not easy. And so I can't say that I blame people for building up these walls, but it's not healthy and it's adding to the problem.
This is where our care and attention and our space giving and space holding comes in. This is where our ability to create safety and our ability to open truly non-judgmentally. And any judgment that we pass is our own on ourselves from somewhere in our past, somewhere in our trauma. So we have to then be honest about where we are in our lives. We have to be able to, sorry, Steve.
No, it's my fault. I'm interrupting. I was just going to say, but we also have to recognize the vicious cycle. So after being honest and vulnerable, we're also exposing ourselves. So it's like, it's a delicate balance. What we do on Fridays in the appreciators method is a wonderful thing, because it not only is it really safe, but I don't know. I just, Barry, maybe you could add to it, because you've seen people leave there and we leave. I know I leave differently. I leave built up and it's genuine. It's not, you know, somebody just giving you compliments to make you feel good. It's something that you're able to feel inside, and you connect in your vulnerability. Connecting in the vulnerable, to me, that's powerful. And that strengthens everyone.
What people do in Friday that they generally don't do anywhere else, especially the other 3 GCC sessions, is they disclose.
Vulnerability.
People will disclose if they feel that the people they're disclosing to will be helpful, constructive, will help them process the issues that they're disclosing. If you live in a cooperative culture, it's very safe to disclose. But if you live in a competitive culture, it's idiotic to disclose, because then your competitors are going to use that information to gain an advantage over you. America is perhaps the most competitive culture of all the nations on the planet. And because we're so bloody competitive, we learn not to disclose. And we're trained to avoid disclosure. And as a result, we're all alienated from each other. We don't even know what we could do to help somebody because we can't find out what their issues are. They won't reveal them. And if I try to guess somebody's undisclosed backstory, I am so far off the mark, it's ridiculous. So I've learned not to try. It takes a lot of guts to disclose. There's a brand new book out by Sherry Turkle. She's a sociologist and psychologist who's at the MIT Media Lab. I know her personally, although I've never collaborated with her. She's got a brand new book out on empathy, and she discloses her backstory. She discloses exactly what happened to her as a child, and it's about empathy. It's a fabulous book, and she's been making the talk circuit rounds, talking about it. But that's extremely courageous and very uncommon in America to disclose backstories like that. Sammy, I saw you raise your hand.
I just gotta say, I have to go, guys. Really enjoyed it. I have to go a little earlier today.
Bye, Glenn.
So, thank you. Bye-bye.
Glenn, it's always a joy to see you, man.
Can I just touch on what Barry said about competition? Because this is something that comes up a lot, that people want to get rid of competition. But I think it would be easier, rather than trying to get rid of it, to use it in a positive way. So like for me personally, one of the things that helped me along my spiritual path, or my, going in of my own being, or, and recognizing things about myself, is my own competitiveness with myself. I wanted to see. I was going to be great at seeing. So, I'm more about redirecting things like competition or other traits that we might look at as negative. I'd rather redirect them than try to get rid of them. Everything we have is here for a reason. It's just about figuring out the right way to use it and to channel it, in my opinion.
I think that's a great opinion, because basically darkness is just condensed light. So it is what it is, and it is where it is. So we have to start at that point. So transmutation is a great word, because it has to transmute to its vaster, lighter self and become selfless. And it's not going to happen overnight. It can, if you wanted to. It can be instantaneous, but the shock could be enough to kill you. So you have to go into your shadow gently and shed the light gently until you can turn full beam on. I totally align with that. It's a beautiful way of putting it. Again, I'll state the same thing. The root of the poison is also the root of the cure. So we have everything in place. If we positized our media completely to do the opposite of what it's doing now, we would be living in paradise in no time. We have the opportunity to do that. We do it bit by bit, as slowly as we want to, and move from this now to the next now, empowering as we go. So that vulnerability has to be backed up with empowerment. The Friday sessions, I've witnessed only one, and it was with you, Stacey, and it was absolutely beautiful. It terrified me because I thought, shit, what if I'm chosen? Because I don't want to see myself in that light. I'm so used to being, shit and crap, and I can't do this and blah, 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 blah. I was thinking, how could I possibly say no to that and still say I'm useless? And that was the thing that scared me. That's why I haven't been back, because I don't want to see myself in that light. It's gonna shatter my illusion. But eventually I'm going to have to at some point, I know, and I'm putting it off, to be fair.
Dave, can you have a look at the other pictures, because people are shaking their hands and waving.
Sorry, I can't see.
Sam,
Thanks, Alex. Hey, might I ask Barry to repeat his last question very succinctly again, because I have a response to that. But it's been quite a while now. I want to make sure that it's in context. You remember your last question?
You mean about disclosing? Or
No.
was it a different, who
No,
remembers
it was
what?
Competition?
Yes.
Oh,
that one.
yeah, well, it wasn't it was a comment that America is a very competitive culture compared to many other countries.
Right.
And the more competitive your culture, the less wise it is to disclose your
Yes.
vulnerabilities, because people will exploit them. And in a
That's the one.
cooperative culture, it's the other way around.
That's the one. See, I think that there's almost a implied polarity there, in that there's been such a worship of me, rugged individualism, do it all myself. Let me go out away from the family. Let me prove myself. Let me make it on my own, quote unquote. So this worship of me, I, self, bootstrapping, et cetera, which I think is a myth, okay, has taken a hold of Western culture. If you look at the richest families, okay, other than Bezos, who made it arguably on his own, Gates came from a very rich family. The Waltons are a family. There's many families that have actually been building up wealth for quite a while. So in this culture of me, I, win at all costs. In other words, this whole saying of nobody remembers who came in number 2, right? You know that if you're in athletes playing athletic sports, that has created this, I would say, culture that we've carefully crafted for many, many decades. So why is it surprising? If there's a me, win at every costs, and people are looking this as a zero-sum game where if that person does even 1 iota better, that's 1 iota that's not coming to me. That mentality gets into this poisonous mindset of, I don't want to see other people succeed. So this is what needs to change. And arguably, other societies other than the United States recognize this and are actually just waiting for the US to grow up. We are babies. The rest of the world understands interdependence, understands the importance of connection, understands the importance of society, of pooling resources for the mutual good. And yet, we seem to be receding in this country. We're fighting against that growing up. So Barry, my response to you is that it's not really surprising, given where we spent so many decades putting our efforts and energy and accolades and attention and media focus, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a surprise that this is a culture we built for ourselves. Especially if we let people just graduate from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3 to grade 4 and say, I'm going to overlook that F. I'm going to overlook that D. I'm going to overlook that you didn't even come to class. I'm going to overlook that, whatever it is that, got you to sort of get by. There's no real set of understanding that there's a set of skills and thinking capacity and the ability to put information together, the ability to dig in and do some, directed research, the ability to look at, pros and cons, the ability to hold conflicting ideas together and sort of reason about it. That's not, often appreciated. In fact, it's derided too often.
Yeah.
So we have created this culture that we sit in. The question is, are we able to think about other people than ourselves and sort of begin to appreciate connection in other people, or do we still just want to take it to the extreme? And right now, we're on the dark path, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Over.
What I mean by that comment that the country gets the government it deserves is the community, or the community gets the culture it deserves. And it usually because there's quite a few people not taking part in the voting process. That allows those who are taking part to specifically elect the wealthiest people with the most money. We want to give them the most returns for their shareholdings in the corporation. Oh, well.
Yeah, this attitude of laissez-faire just allows those predators to come in, fill that political gap, take all the taxes, and basically abscond with them. You know, there should be many, many, many investigations into how the Trump family, for example, now has hundreds of millions more assets than they did 5 years ago. And yet there's so many scandals that even that has not been given sufficient focus and attention.
I think that the overt aspects of all of this create a false importance, and the covert undercurrent that is all of the people like ourselves that are moving towards a better world and becoming the antidote. You don't have to sing and dance about it. It's not a competition. And the fact of the matter is, it's a tortoise and a hare type of situation. And luckily, I think we are the tortoise. We're not all bells and whistles. And our ability to co-create, be vulnerable, etc., immunizes us against the things that lurk within us. So we're able to look at them bit by bit as we feel comfortable and shed light on them in the right measure without causing damage or harm to self or selfless. And I think the cohesiveness of our friendships in the cyber world and the physical world mirror this. You know, working with the Buddhist monks here and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure, you know, each and every one of us can list the people and cooperations that we have. And again, Alex, behind you is a graphic show of that growth and those cooperations. Now, this can only grow. I can see that tapestry behind you, filtered with other threads, other colours, as the world and the diversity starts to grow and starts to move, and the energy starts to flow again where it's been allowed to stagnate through competition, through one-upmanship, through I, through me. And again, it starts at ego, I go, we go, free go to free. We have to move through those processes of acute separation, acute pain and suffering, acute discomfort, because the crab ain't going to pop its shell knowing that it's going to be soft for a day. There's a threat around it, unless there are other crabs that have done this and can hold space for it. So, good crabs, thank you for holding space for me. We are each other's crabs. Or again, the analogy that I used when I first came here, the hedgehogs covering the soft underbelly and walking into the room with the spines facing inwards. We've now begun to shed the spines, knowing that we don't necessarily need them anymore. We're getting to a stage where trust is forming, and it's a process that's natural, because the level of trust that I have now is where it should be, I guess, if that makes sense.
If I may, I just want a small point. Largely, I do agree with you, David. It's a great sentiment, but I caution us against eliminating all notion of competition. You know, when a small family has limited financial resources to get whatever limited foods that they can afford, there is a zero-sum game involved. If some of that goes to taxes and goes to pay off the Trump family, or goes to pay off $2 trillion to Wall Street, that's assets and benefit that families, working people do not get. There is a competition afoot for those resources that are portrayed as limited, and doled out as limited via payroll and, you know, salaries and that sort of thing, okay? And that's the way that control has been taken from most people. So there is a real sense, and we have to fight. We actually have to address that, you know, ingeniously designed system. Ingenious. I mean, it's nothing but an escalator for money to go to the billionaires at the top 0.1%, okay? And it was well designed. It was sold as capitalism. It was sold as freedom. It was bought hook, line, and sinker for the last 250, 300 years. You know, we have to realize that's the biggest scam that's been perpetrated in this country. And we have to redesign that. So, you know, use the word conflict, use the word competition, use the word, you know, whatever. We have to address it, and we have to co-create a new society, or it will come down to violent conflict.
Sam, I totally with that. And in that, again, I'll come back to inner work. The inner work that we do gives us a toxicology report of ourselves so that it can become selfless. And we see where all of those flags are raised. And in that, it gives us minute micro opportunities to step away from the gaming table to begin with, and eventually gives us vaster opportunities as we coalesce and collaborate to shut down the casinos in our towns that are taking the lives of our young people, and to shut down the drug dealers and the government officials that are touting those drugs to certain areas to keep them in that state. Because basically the kids that go into the army, the ones that turn to drugs and the ones that turn to prostitution and various different things are the smart ones that would change this. It's the sheep that go to the middle class, as a rule. It's the problem kids that would be too smart, that would be a threat against the Rockefellers, and the families in the communities that are bonded and work together, that will be a threat. So the schooling system parts that from the beginning, and all of these systems. So we have to do the inner work to see where the flags are raised in our own psyche, in our own consciousness. And then naturally those toxins are released, those traumas are released, and we begin to heal and step away from each of those gaming tables. And we make better choices because we are more authentic within. And eventually, as I say, we shut down those casinos in our towns, and we shut down the corruption, the drug dealing, and the factories where the drugs are produced. And we create better communities, decentralized.
Thanks, Dave. There's somebody with their hand up.
Sam and then Meg.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that I think is going to be an unpopular opinion, okay? And it's a switch, because 10 years ago, I would not have said this. I believe that much of what passes for light work, for awokeness, for enlightenment, for self-internal work, for introspection, borders, and this is where I get triggered, okay? This is where I get offensive to some people, borders victim blaming. It basically is another way to say, don't look at the system, don't address the maladies of the system, look internally, make the best of it. As our 50% crumbles to 25%, crumbles to 5%, crumbles to 1%, it's basically always saying, yes, I can be more enlightened. Yes, I can go out and enjoy nature. Yes, I can go out and take walks and drink tea. Yes, I can meet with other people and, you know, look into their eyes and whatever. And that unfortunately does not address the 1% taking 50%, 75%, 90%, 95%, 99%, 99.1%, which is a clear trend. So I think there's both. There is a lot of inner work. I mentioned that a lot. I talk about personal presentation. I talk about skills, but there is also addressing the systemic issues, and that cannot be done by just saying, oh, you know, there's light everywhere, and, you know, I'm just going to be heavenly and I'm going to be calm and I'm going to meditate. meditation is not going to solve the systemic problems, not by itself. So I do think that's the notion in which I say we have to take action directly and address those powers who just want us to go away and meditate, just want us to go ahead and garden, just want us to go ahead and just tend to our babies, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where I get a little bit triggered and a little bit triggering. Over.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say, which is in line with that, is that not everybody wants to do the inner work, and they're not going to choose to do the inner work. And specifically, people in power are not usually those that are geared to do that sort of inner work. As far as the woke people, I see power in those organizations too. I mean, there's somebody on Facebook that blocked me because I was daring to question him. And this is somebody that puts himself out as this like spiritual guru of love. And he's anything but that. And to me, that's even scarier.
Lots of hands up. Alex, David, then I'll go.
I have to check out shortly. And I just wanted to mention this idea that false prophets appear on the web as much as they do in any organization or religion. And they're easily identified usually because they come and go. They don't hang around. They get identified and they get pushed out or forced away or enlightened somehow. They own up to the falsity of it.
Meta comment. It is after the 2-hour mark, so I would like to take a few minutes to do a retrospective on this, preferably before Alex leaves. So I was just thinking, could we then have quickly David, then Stacy, then be going into that retrospective.
Well, I'll go real quick. I just want to add to Alex's comment as far as that these people show themselves. This is why I think it's really important to look at the outlying behaviors, because in this particular case, I was able to engage with this person in such a way that they showed some uncharacteristic behavior. And when I reached out to other people who were viewing it, they acknowledged, yeah, I'm not used to that person acting like that. But that's what we need to pay attention to, because those are the things that people keep hidden from us usually. So it's the uncharacteristic behavior that we have to delve more deeply into. And I'm complete.
David?
Woke, enlightenment, blah, 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 blah. It's all bullshit, basically. It's basically, for me, it's just taking a level of responsibility for your own actions. Because prior to this, I would like to take all of the world leaders into a dark room with a big stick for an hour. That's all it would take. And I'm sure I could sort it out. And as far as being woke and all that sort of crap means, I posted this on GCC, I think, as well. I eat less meat. That doesn't mean that I don't still want to kill you. But what it does mean that is if I do lose my temper and kill you, I won't eat the carcass afterwards, or at least I'm less inclined to do so. Violence is not the answer. It definitely isn't. It definitely isn't. But now and again, it does help. Sometimes a crack on the jaw does an awful lot more than 20 years worth of conversation. And sometimes it's necessary in self-defense or other forms and formats. And I come from a steelworking town as a gay man where I've had to stick up for myself many times. And sometimes it boils down to a point. Yeah, absolutely, discipline. It boils down to a point where people can verbally attack from a spiritually, mentally, and physically demeaning space, knowing that they will have no comeback whatsoever from a person that is not suited in an IQ state or many other states. And sometimes you see a person turn around and clout them that's had enough, and you see their demeanor and ideals change. They become more respectful of others. So everything has its place. Apart from that, the inner work just gives you more intelligent ability, more heartfelt ability to move. It's just releasing the anger and aggression to allow you to, and everything else that goes with it, the pain and the suffering, to allow you to act on a vaster scale. You see, if I'd been where I was 10 years ago, I wouldn't be able to interface with you guys. I wouldn't be able to interface with all of the people that I do interface with. So it gives us the opportunity, as within, so throughout. It's an equal or an equilibrium. It's a balance. It's a 0-point field. It's neither positive or negative. So basically, our inner work allows us to do the outer work without fucking it up, so that we don't
Yes.
start wrecking the stuff that we've done.
I'm talking because I'm sending an audio signal to Dave, who's on a mobile. That just to let him know Sam's raising his hands again.
Well, I hate to cut it off, but I do know it's past the hour by at least 10 minutes, and I wanted to ask my retrospective questions and give people a chance to respond. So I just wanted to, these are not surprising. These probably sound very familiar to you, which is, did we focus on a topic? Did you understand the focus? And did we focus on a topic? Was the moderation effective? Did it move us towards collaboration in some sense? And did it move us towards any of the specific pillars? Did we move towards co-visioning? Did we move towards sense making? Did we move towards agreements, which I believe was related to the topic? Okay, so I just wanted to get a little bit of reflection on whether or not we achieved that in today's session. Over. Teese has his hand up, then Alex.
Yes, I just want to mention positively Glenn's moderation. He really tried to add new, say, bones, flesh and bones to the idea of Alexander. So I hope Alexander has gained from it, and then he can elaborate on it, because he's only want to have connected sides. Then he comes with more ideas with it, so why it should be done and so on. So that's what I want to say. So there was some focus when Glenn went into asking more specific and adding more ideas. So that's, and I won't go answering your question specifically, but just this is the positive side of it for today.
Thanks, Teese.
Well, sorry, Stacey.
I didn't say anything.
Alex?
I've got a wealth of ideas from the input of all the participants, and that's fodder for I can use that to help refine the vision statement and tweak the mechanisms that might help establish a coherent co-visioning, co-creation network of documents. So, my suggestion is that anybody who has an inkling to be involved, to create a document, get to work on it, and that'll be a start. Over.
Thanks, Alex. I'm just going around the room in my particular layout. So how about Barry?
Well, I've read this before about what goes into an agreement, generally a social contract. First thing is shared values. Did we agree on a set of shared values that we can write down, that we all subscribe to these top 3 values that we're all going to subscribe to? So far, I could not write down a set of shared values for GCC. There may be a set of shared values that could be written down, but I'm not in a position to write them down and believe that I've captured them. After values comes goals, because goals are derivative of values. Could we write down a set of 1 or 2 goals that everybody in GCC wants to subscribe to. Perhaps there isn't such a set of goals, but I'm not in a position to write them down. I don't believe I could say what they are and get everybody to say, yes, these are our values and these are our goals. Now, if you have values and goals, you can say, do we have any good ideas on how to reach the agreed upon goals? Now, we have lots of ideas. I mean, I hear lots of ideas floating around, but are any of the ideas speaking to how to reach a goal, 1 or 2 goals that we all agree on, that are subordinate to 1 or 2 values that we all agree on? And here again, I see lots of ideas, but they're meandering around a set of dissimilar goals and dissimilar values. So I think we're still meandering.
Let's see. There are some people who are not visible. How about David? On the retrospective questions, did we focus? Was moderation effective? Did we collaborate? Did we achieve sense making, co-creation, co-visioning? Did it move us forward? You're on mute, David.
I think we're still going round in circles. I think Barry had a very pertinent point there. I think we're like a one-legged duck. We need to again, mission statement. We need exactly what Barry said. I think that the time that we're taking could be spent a lot more positively and a lot more with a lot more outcome. And we could do a lot more together. And we could do a lot more of our individual projects and seeing them, the effect catalyze across the board. I'd like to see more actual, true, structured movement.
Okay, thank you, David. Ms. Druss, Stacy.
It was more focused towards the end than the beginning.
Any other thoughts on co-visioning, sense-making, co-creation, moderation, topic, focus?
Just to agree with what I've already heard.
Okay, then I'm going to go next, and then I'll ask Kayla if she's got some thoughts. In particular, I wanted to respond to Barry specifically, and I know this is a checkout, but I just wanted to put this out there. Barry, for what you described, I would use the word alignment rather than agreement, okay? Because I think all those things that you identify means that, we're probably more aligned top to bottom, with purpose, mission, goals, values, whatever, okay? But for agreements, I actually believe none of that is necessary for agreements. Agreements can be very specific. Alex, I will meet you at 3 o'clock at the 7-Eleven at the corner, with $4 for a candy bar. That's an agreement. I don't need mission statements. I don't need values. I don't need, goody, warm feelings to make that kind of agreement. Likewise, I could say, you want to extract money from me. I want this particular house. We have very different values, but we can actually reach an agreement on a transaction. So for me, that's why agreements, and in particular micro agreements, are a great place to start, because it doesn't presuppose alignment on values, mission, purpose, meaning, all that stuff, okay? All that stuff is great. I would love that, okay? But for agreements, I don't think we need it. And that's why I really wanted to start with agreements. So that's why I like this focus of agreements and even focus as one of the key components of GCC. So I know that's kind of a departure from the checkout, but I just want to respond to Barry on that particular point on the record. So let's go Stacy and then Kayla.
Yeah, just real quick. The only value agreement that I would need, or I would want to see, is the agreement to be honest. I know that sounds like you shouldn't need it, and I used to think that were the case, but I've changed my mind. I think it needs to be an agreement.
Much for discussion there, Stacy. Excellent. Okay. Let's see, Ms. Kayla Ancheta Che, would you like to check out and give your assessment of Did we focus? Was moderation effective? Did we co-create? Did we sense make? Did we co-vision? Did we achieve focus?
So I didn't quite understand what the focus was from the very beginning. But towards the last half hour, 45 minutes, let's say, I started to, be in alignment with whatever the topics were being bounced around. I think we co-created nicely on that respect, just because it kind of sprouted into something that a lot of people were able to participate. Moderation was good, of course, and yeah, nothing more to add. Thank you, guys.
Cool. All right. So at this point, I'm going to formally step down as any particular kind of role, even though I didn't actually have a role here. You guys are free to leave the session completely open, and I'll come and probably
No,
try and shut
Sam,
it-
hold
Yeah.
Hold on a minute.
What?
Somebody's
No, gotta go, Stacy, gotta go.
What is the question? What was the question? You don't have to explain it, but I think we have an implied agreement.
Okay,
that
I'll
you
just
should
I'll
tell
just
us
give you
what the
hints.
question
Okay,
is.
I'm being honest, but not completely transparent here. Okay, it was one of
Okay.
the first 5. I'm thinking about one of the first 5 questions, not the second 5, and I'll leave it that until next week.
All right, well, I can't log out without the agreement of the people left in the session. Because it was my session.
All right, you can't log out yet. I don't agree that you can log out yet. All right, I'm gonna leave this open for another, I don't know, hour and 15 minutes if you guys like.
Do you want to stop it and restart it so we don't have to worry about going over
Not
that
really,
more?
because I do have to use my Zoom session in about
Got it.
an hour and 40 minutes. So it's going to be on my account anyway. And
Okay.
so, I'm going to have to shut it down at that particular point, unless somebody else wants to use theirs, that's completely impossible also. Yeah, unfortunately, this is one of those sessions where I do have another meeting at noon my time today.
Okay. Well, see everybody tomorrow.
Sorry, Stacy, I know I'm pushing your buttons, but hey, it's a big
you're
topic.
The only button you're pushing is that I don't know that you would let yourself get away with that if it were someone else.
Oh, I think I would.
I don't know.
I have, in fact, I have.
I think you would push harder than I'm pushing you right now.
And that's completely okay. I completely respect your pushing at whatever intensity.
I'm going back to find those 5 questions from last week. I'll get back to you.
The hint is it's one of the first 5, not one of the second 5.
That makes it easier.
I had a comment. Go ahead, Alex. It's your show.
No, it's okay. I just want to say we can locate that question now.
I had a comment to make about a point that both Sam and I made, that you start off with this highly competitive culture. You end up with a disparity in wealth distribution, which is really way, way out of whack. And you also end up with a lot of violence. And if you look at these 3 elements of a culture, America is very competitive compared to other countries. We have a very high disparity of wealth compared to other countries, and we have an enormous amount of violence in our culture, especially gun violence compared to other countries. And it was 22 years ago, I believe this spring, 22 years ago, that America was shocked by an episode of violence that was not anticipated. Who remembers what happened in 1999, 22 years ago, about this time of year? That was the school shooting in Columbine High School in Colorado, where there was the first of what turns out to be a whole swarm of school shootings, mass shootings. Last week in America, in 7 days last week, there were 7 mass shootings in America, 4 of which involved fatalities. And the others involved sending people to the hospital, not fatal, but critically injured. One of the things that when the Columbine school shooting occurred in 1999, a lot of people said, "What's the root? Why is what caused these 2 kids to go in and with these weapons and shoot up the school?" And it was a difficult question to even think about. But one of the things that I thought about is the name of the school was Columbine, and Columbine happens to be the state flower of Colorado, which is how the school got its name. And the Columbine plant, Columbine flower, is quite interesting because it grows very tall. During the growing season in Colorado, when you have sun and warmth and rain, the nutrients go up and make a very, very tall flower, which has a huge flower at the top. It's top heavy. And at the end of the growing season, you have all this mass at the top and a very thin stem. And what happens eventually, and this is very predictable, the plant falls over because it's top heavy. A very tall system, which is top heavy, is going to fall over. And that's what's going to happen in our culture. Our culture is top heavy and it's going to fall over. It's an easy thing to predict if you think about the physics. And the clue is right there in the Columbine plant, which falls over at the end of the growing season. It's unsustainable. Our system is unsustainable.
It's a good thing it is. It's a good thing it is, because that which needs to fall will fall. And, you know, stemming back to the British colonization of the Americas, it's all ridiculous, you know. This destruction and denaturalization of indigenous peoples for individualized greed, you know, that is one. But every European culture has done the same, and now Europe amasses itself to do the same. This schismatic ideal of separation, wherever it came into the human psyche, has created this damage, and I believe that's where the root cause was initiated. A tribe at some point was weakened to a point where it believed that it was separate from another, and that idea of lack came in, that idea of separation came in and spiraled out of control. Although we are a mote of dust in the corner of the universe, it's our responsibility to put that right. We've traveled probably if reincarnation is true, we've probably lived every life we possibly could. We've lived as everything on the planet, probably universes and omniverses beyond that. So to put this right, it should be a simple factor. Somewhere there is a schism. Somewhere there is a parasitic ideal within our consciousness. And I'll bring it back to the bee husband who plays God.
The who?
And basically he watches over the bees. And when a parasitic invasion occurs, the bees form with stunted wings. And many of these bees become lover bees. So they go about the nest, giving care and attention to those workers that are constantly moving. And some of the tougher workers don't want to know, so they peck the lover bee. But others watch over them and take them, even make sure that they eat, make sure that they're looked after. And these bees fly in a different way. They don't use the wings, they fly by giving care and attention. But still, the parasitic invasion is there. And these parasites pretend to be part of the hive. They even smell like bees. And they're tiny, so they can't be seen. So the beekeeper, when he finds the lover bees, realizes there's an issue. And he sprinkles ice and sugar across the whole brood so that the bees start to clean each other and start to see these parasites moving covered in powder, the sweetener. And they eat it, of course, as well, and empower themselves. So what, as beekeepers, as be husbands, as beings that are trying to change the world to a better place, can we sprinkle on the planet? The answer for me, I would say, is a dream, an idea of something better. For Elysium, Paradise Earth, and for Genesis, to regenerate the whole system.
Can I
And we
add
can
something?
sprinkle that. Oh, sorry.
I just want to add something to that. The consumption of the parasites, it was the power of the greedy overriding the interests of the majority. Because, you know, in a democratic system where people are voting, it's imperative that the whole population have a vote and take part in the process, because the importance of having democracy is really what it's all about, especially when you've got 70 or 80% in favour of something. Now, the Constitution in the US allows people to opt out and then not do their duty, the democratic duty to cast a vote and use their power of one. So that results in a minority getting power. And of course, we know which minority wants the power most. It's the ones that want to control and enjoy the benefits of that control, which is the wealth, at the expense of the poor people and the poorly educated who didn't bother to vote. Didn't have to, because the Constitution gave them the option to opt out. So they took it because of their poorly educated, because they come from the bottom of the pyramid. The people who have missed out on education and missed out on opportunities that more wealthy people have access to. There's a balance there. You know, you get people in wealthy communities who opt out too. That's just, you know, a matter for them, their personal choice and the poor education. Democracy does work well in countries where everybody votes, like Australia, like New Zealand. And in Europe, many countries in Europe where have compulsory voting, they have good education, good healthcare. And this is an obvious point that a lot of people seem to overlook in the US. I don't know why. They think this freedom to make your own choice about voting is paramount. Well, I think that's the cause of the issues. That's the reason the US is laughed at by the rest of the world. Over.
I think that the parasitic ideal has spread through all of these systems now. It's too late. So the Asian sugar needs to be spread across the media systems. It needs to be spread across the governance systems. It needs to be spread across all of these systems, because basically all of them have been corrupted. All of them have been factorized and monetarized. And now we're seeing this in Buddhism in Thailand, where beforehand, you know, the monks would not be allowed mobile phones and would not touch money in any way, shape, or form. It's been corrupted. The Asian sugar needs to be spread. It needs to be spread now. It needs to be spread thickly, and we need to change the whole system, because basically it's down to a two-party system, and both parties are now controlled by the parasites.
I love the idea that we have some power individually as human beings, as nodes in the network. We have some power. And the talented people who agree with that realize that all they have to do is make one document. They'll begin to do it. And this idea will grow. There's plenty of talented people out there who have everything they could wish for because of their celebrity status. And when they realize that they need one page and a couple of friends, there's another sprout. So there's forest. We're growing a forest, really, of people power. I see it that way. That's a good way to look at it, analytically. Over.
I totally align with that. And I think the fact of the matter is that people are taking the corruption and the things that you've just spoken about. You see, I began to stop voting purposefully because I had absolutely no faith in any of the parties, none whatsoever. Or the ones I did never got voted in, i.e. the Green Party, etc., etc. So I've only voted twice in my entire life, and I would go to jail rather than vote, because if you're voting for pirates, you're going to get pirates. And if you're voting for parasitically controlled pirates, you're still going to get parasitically controlled pirates. So that's led me to a space where I've taken this into my own hands and started to write my own story. Sorry, Stacey, go on.
No, I just wanted to say goodbye and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks. Take care. Thank you. So now, Alex, as we all start to come together and start to, you're back.
I'm trying to leave.
I just put in the 5 questions that you wanted to remember what they were.
I have them written down. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. Now I just got to get out of here.
Get out of here.
What do you say? Like, you focus well. Good sense of humor. The good sense of humor. I mean, if there's a crisis happening, it's difficult to have a sense of humor, especially when you're involved with a group that are trying to focus on solutions. But I suppose it's a part of the pie that's necessary. That's necessary ingredient in the soup, so to speak, as Doug would suggest. I'll bring that up on unblocking. Over.
Well, the thing is, we can add sand to the cogs and workings, or we can lubricate them. And one aspect adds sand to the workings. It's not going to work. It's not going to help that much. I mean, at the moment, I'm in a reasonably dire situation, I would say, but I'm laughing all the way through it. I'm weak on a daily basis. I've got lesions on me body and skin. I've had multiple problems and issues, internal pain and what have you. But I've laughed all the way through it. And you've got to. What's the point in not? Situations happen. You can add sand, you can add lubricant. And lubricant for me is the better option. There's lots of things to be happy about. And I'm not.
Yeah, you're your soul.
Yeah. I'm something else, and that will go on forever. And it's teaching me resilience. It's teaching me humility, and it's teaching me to look after the body, because it is the vessel for that in this space, and I can do more with it functioning fully. And I can do more with.
Sorry, Barry knows a lot about the functionality when it comes to the soul, because we have the sole objective in our lives.
Yep.
I've got a sole objective to bring that message to the United States, but I don't want to fly. I want to go by sailing boat, a solar-powered sailing boat, and that well, that's not going to come about unless the supporters, the Swiss investors, philanthropists, decide to help me fund the hand farm. Because there's boat builders in this town that would be willing to pitch in for the cost of a solar-powered boat if I was going to use it to go to the United States with this message that they need to change the Constitution. It needs an amendment to remove that freedom to opt out of the democratic process. And that way we'll get millions of more people voting and a much fairer system. Over.
I think there's a tendency to, I mean, we begin life as babies, and our needs are very local. And as we grow up in age, we sort of expand our horizons. And the thing is that as we expand our horizons, they eventually stop expanding at some point shy of how far they could have gone. So we always end up with a bit of a parochial perspective, a limited horizon. And so beyond that horizon, there's the everybody else who's got a different horizon. And so we don't have a combined universal perspective that encompasses everybody. And I don't know if we'll ever get there, but I mean, there are a few people on the planet every generation whose horizon is unlimited, but not very many. And people whose horizon is the entire cosmos, not just their local community, their local country, their local culture. They're beyond the planet Earth. They're beyond the solar system. But very few people actually have an unbounded horizon. And because we all have limited horizons where we're concerned, we're always going to be at odds with people on the other side of that horizon. And that's why I think we keep running into conflicts. We don't have the same values. We don't have the same goals. We don't think about sustainability. It's very hard to think about sustainability. You got to think about sustainability of the biosphere, the planet, the environment of the entire planet, and not just this year or next year or during our own lifetime. We have to think about children and grandchildren's lifetime and generations ahead. And most people don't have that perspective. And even if they have the perspective, they don't have the scientific and math and mental models to reason coherently about it. So even if you say, well, we want the planet to be habitable in 500 years, what needs to be done? Most people couldn't tell you what needs to be done because they can't predict what's going to happen if we do nothing. You have very few people who can view that far ahead. That's why vision is important, because we all have limited vision, limited perspective, and parochial values.
I've got a job on my hands to get a permit to grow hemp because it's certified. You've got to be certified to grow, and you've got to go through government.
That is local to the region where you live in Australia. There's practically nothing anybody can do outside of where you live to facilitate that.
I've got an opportunity to grow bamboo instead of hemp if I can't get the correct permit. So that's good, because bamboo is increasing in value as a building material and furniture in houses, and it's sustainable and it grows rapidly, drawing CO2 out of the air.
Sorry, I left the mic on there. If you check out Green School in Bali, they treat bamboo with borax and boracic acid. It can be waxed afterwards and placed outside. It can last up to 200 years, especially if it's treated and kept inside with the waxing process or oiling as well. And their building techniques are evolving on a weekly, daily, yearly basis.
In
and
Bali,
they're teaching. Yeah. Green School, Bali.
Green School.
Yeah.
Okay, folks.
Are we all talked out? I think we might be all talked out.
I'm all puffed.
It is almost 1 o'clock here, so I'm going to love you and leave you guys. Thank you very much for a wonderful conversation and great company.
I'm checking out unless Kyla's got some input.
Oh no, I was just gonna say bye, David. I actually enjoyed listening to the crickets in the background. So I was listening to that while I was taking a shower. Take care of yourself, and no, don't be sorry. I loved it.
Everybody have
But
a good
anyhow, that's it.
Have a wonderful time, guys.
if it's in your part.
Bye.
I,
And Sam, if
Bye,
you're
everybody.
listening, you
Take
can
care.
shut us down. We're gonna all head out now.
I'll chat with you later, Barry, okay?
Yeah,
My family is
anytime.
on their
I'm
way
around
right
most
now.
days, so anytime you want to chat,
Perfect.
find me in the
Okay.
messenger and we'll talk.
Sounds good. Bye.
Do I have a stop recording feature? Let's see. Can I stop recording? I was going to try to stop recording, but I don't seem to have that power, so I'm just going to disconnect.